Picture this. The most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, representatives from dozens of star systems, all gathered in a magnificent crystal dome orbiting Nexus Prime. You'd think with all that collective intelligence, they could solve a simple problem without making it 10 times worse. You'd be wrong. The creature has destroyed 3 mining operations, terrorized 4 trade routes, and caused widespread panic across 7 sectors, announced Councillor Vexthara, her tentacles writhing with what passed for indignation among the Zelanti. Something must be done about this Krex individual. Ah yes, something must be done. The universal battle cry of bureaucrats everywhere, regardless of species. The holographic display showed security footage of the incidents. A massive figure, easily 12 feet tall with chitinous plates covering a humanoid frame, moving through space stations and asteroid facilities. What the footage didn't show, because nobody bothered to investigate, was the desperate, almost frantic way Krex searched through everything he encountered. Perhaps we should attempt communication, suggested Ambassador Quilon, his metallic voice ringing through his translation device. The Meridians were always the reasonable ones, which explained why nobody ever listened to them. Communication? Vexthara's voice pitch rose an octave. With that monster? It nearly destroyed the Kepler mining platform. Correction, Quilon replied with mechanical patience. It searched the Kepler mining platform extensively, then left without taking any valuables or harming anyone permanently. The difference between destruction and searching apparently was lost on most of the council. Shocking, I know. Councillor Brack Thorn, representing the warrior Ergony species, slammed his 4-armed bulk against the podium. The creature is clearly aggressive. We should respond with force. And start an interstellar incident with the Vorthak Collective? Quilon's optical sensors flickered, which was basically the Meridian equivalent of rolling their eyes. Krex may be acting alone, but his people won't appreciate us vaporizing one of their own without cause. This, of course, led to the brilliant compromise that only a committee could produce. Exile, declared Vexthara, as if she'd just invented fire. We relocate the creature to an uninhabited world where it can't cause further damage. And if it dies there? Quilon asked. Vexthara's tentacles performed what could generously be called a shrug. Then the problem solves itself. The vote was unanimous, excluding the Meridians who abstained on principle. They selected Keth 7, a barren moon in an abandoned system. No atmosphere, no resources, no life. Perfect for making a problem disappear without technically committing murder. The transport operation went smoothly. Krex didn't resist, which should have been their first clue that something was off. When you're dealing with a supposedly dangerous monster, and it cooperates with its own exile, maybe, just maybe, you should ask why. But no. The Galactic Council patted themselves on their various appendages, filed their paperwork, and moved on to the next item on their agenda. Problem solved. Case closed. Justice served. What a bunch of idiots. 3 days into his exile on Keth 7, Krex was dying. Not from violence or accident, but from the same slow starvation that had driven him to those attacks in the first place. He sat on a rocky outcropping, his massive frame hunched over, staring at the alien stars through the thin atmosphere dome the Council had grudgingly provided. If anyone had bothered to ask, and I mean anyone at all, they would have learned that Krex wasn't some rampaging beast. He was a geologist. Well, the Vorthak equivalent anyway. His species evolved to process specific crystalline formations that grew in deep space environments. Not exactly your standard carbon-based diet. The mining platforms he'd terrorized weren't random targets. They were harvesting the exact crystals his body needed to survive. The trade routes he'd disrupted carried shipments of processed minerals that contained trace amounts of his required nutrients. Every single incident was a desperate attempt to find food. But did the Galactic Council's crack investigation team figure this out? Did they notice the pattern? Did they think to consult a basic xenobiology database? Of course not. Krex had been slowly starving for months. His home world had been strip-mined by corporate interests, the crystals sold off to the highest bidder for industrial purposes. His people had filed complaints, submitted requests, followed proper channels. All ignored or buried in bureaucratic red tape. So Krex did what any reasonable person would do when the system failed them. He went looking for what he needed to survive. The fact that his searches appeared violent to other species was just a tragic misunderstanding that nobody bothered to clarify. Now he was going to die alone on a rock, surrounded by nothing but regret, and the bitter irony that there were probably enough processed minerals in his atmosphere generator to keep him alive, but if only he could access them without destroying his only source of breathable air. Meanwhile, 3 sectors away, Nurse Maya Rodriguez was having her own problems with galactic justice. Maya had committed the apparently heinous crime of treating patients who couldn't afford treatment. Her medical station's administration had discovered she'd been using supplies and equipment to help uninsured travelers, refugees, and basically anyone who showed up bleeding or sick. Unauthorized use of medical resources, they called it. A violation of profit protocols. As if letting people die was somehow more ethical than bending a few rules about payment plans. So Maya found herself transferred to the worst assignment in the medical corps. Supply runs to quarantine worlds and exile moons. Her current cargo hold was filled with medical waste, expired medications, and basic survival gear deemed surplus to requirements. Her destination? A routine supply drop to the atmospheric maintenance stations scattered throughout the outer rim. Boring work, but it beat dealing with hospital administrators who measured compassion in billing units. Maya's ship, the medical transport Nightingale, was 3 days out from Keth 7 when her navigation system decided to have a complete nervous breakdown. 1 minute she was cruising through normal space. The next minute every alarm in the cockpit was screaming at her in 17 different languages. The proximity warnings were particularly creative in their profanity. "Oh, come on," Maya muttered, fighting with the controls as the ship bucked and shuddered. "Not now, you piece of junk." But the Nightingale had other plans. The emergency systems kicked in, overriding her manual controls and initiating what the computer cheerfully announced as a mandatory emergency landing procedure. Which was a fancy way of saying she was about to crash. Part 3. When humans do what humans do best. The Nightingale hit the surface of Keth 7 with all the grace of a drunken rhinoceros. Maya managed to keep the life support systems online and avoid any major hull breaches, but the landing thrusters were toast and her communications array was now a very expensive piece of abstract art. She sat in the pilot's seat for a moment, assessing the damage while sipping her emergency tea. Yes, tea. Maya Rodriguez was the kind of person who kept a thermal mug of Earl Grey in her emergency kit, because some things were more important than survival rations. "Well," she said to nobody in particular, "this is just fantastic." That's when she noticed the massive figure approaching her crash site. Any reasonable person would have panicked. Any sane individual would have locked the hatches and reached for a weapon. Maya Rodriguez looked at the 12-foot-tall alien walking toward her ship and felt annoyed that her tea had spilled during the crash. Krex stopped about 50 meters away, clearly visible through the cockpit windows. Up close, he was even more imposing than the security footage suggested. His chitinous plates caught the light from Keth 7's distant sun, creating an almost iridescent effect. His face, while clearly non-human, had an oddly expressive quality. He looked, Maya realized, exhausted. "Hello there," she called through the ship's external speakers, her voice echoing across the barren landscape. "I don't suppose you're the local welcoming committee?" Krex tilted his massive head, a gesture so human-like it was startling. He approached slowly, hands visible and empty, like someone trying not to spook a nervous animal. "Smart alien." Maya opened the external airlock and stepped out, still holding her tea mug. The atmospheric dome provided breathable air, though it tasted like recycled gym socks. She looked up at Krex, who towered over her, and waited. He pointed at her ship, then at himself, then made a questioning gesture with his hands. "Are you asking if I'm okay?" Maya asked. Krex nodded. "Not. Well, that's unexpectedly polite for a supposedly dangerous monster." She studied his face. noting the way his eyes moved, the careful way he held himself. "You're not a monster at all, are you?" Something in his expression shifted. Hope, maybe, or relief. Maya had spent 15 years as a trauma nurse. She'd seen every kind of injury, illness, and suffering the galaxy had to offer. She'd also developed an almost supernatural ability to read people, regardless of species. What she saw in Krex wasn't aggression or malice. She saw someone who was sick. "When's the last time you ate?" she asked. Krex's confusion was obvious. He mimed eating, then shook his head repeatedly, pointing at the barren landscape around them. "Can't find food here, huh?" Maya looked around at the rocky wasteland. "Yeah, this place isn't exactly a garden paradise. What do you usually eat?" "Yeah." The language barrier made communication difficult, but Maya was persistent. Through a combination of gestures, drawings in the dust, and sheer stubborn determination, she began to piece together Krex's story. He drew crystalline structures in the dirt, pointed at mining equipment in her cargo hold, mimed the actions of searching, finding nothing, growing weaker. "Oh, you poor thing," Maya said, understanding dawning. "You're not a monster. You're just hungry." She thought about the mining platforms he'd allegedly attacked, the trade routes he'd disrupted, all carrying processed minerals and crystalline materials. "Those idiots," she muttered. "They exiled you for looking for food." Krex nodded emphatically, then slumped against a nearby boulder. Even that simple movement seemed to exhaust him. Maya Rodriguez had seen enough. She rolled up her sleeves, grabbed her medical kit, and got to work. If the Galactic Council thought they could dump their problems on a rock and walk away, they were about to learn why humans had a reputation for being unreasonably stubborn about things like basic decency. Maya's first priority was figuring out exactly what Krex needed to survive. Her medical scanner wasn't designed for Vorthak physiology, but she'd worked with enough different species to improvise. "Hold still," she told him, running the scanner over his massive arm. "This might tickle." The readings were fascinating and concerning in equal measure. Krex's body chemistry was unlike anything in her medical database, but the signs of malnutrition were universal. His cellular structure was breaking down, his energy reserves were critically low, and his immune system was barely functional. "Good news and bad news," Maya announced, reviewing the data. "The good news is I know what's wrong with you. The bad news is you're basically starving to death." She examined her cargo hold with new purpose. The Nightingale was carrying medical waste and surplus supplies, but Maya had learned to see potential where others saw garbage. The mineral supplements designed for silicon-based life forms might work. The crystalline components in her scanner's power cells could be adapted. Even the trace elements in her ship's water filtration system might help. "Okay, Krex, here's the plan," she said, laying out supplies on a makeshift work table. "I'm going to synthesize something that hopefully won't kill you. If it does kill you, I promise to write a very angry letter to the Galactic Council." Krex watched her work with obvious interest. Maya had set up a basic chemical processor using components from her medical equipment and parts salvaged from the crashed ship. It wasn't pretty, but it was functional. "The trick," she explained while working, "is finding the right combination of minerals and energy compounds. Your body processes crystalline matrices the way humans process glucose. I just need to create an artificial version." The first batch of synthetic crystals looked like rock candy made by a colorblind chemist. Krex examined them carefully, then looked at Maya with what could only be described as polite skepticism. "Hey, I'm a nurse, not a chef," Maya said. "Just try it." Krex took a small crystal and placed it in his mouth. His expression went through several rapid changes before settling on something like surprised relief. "Good?" Maya asked. Krex nodded enthusiastically and reached for more. Over the next few days, Maya refined her process while Krex's condition improved dramatically. They developed a communication system combining basic gestures, drawings, and a growing vocabulary of shared words. Krex was remarkably intelligent, picking up human language concepts with impressive speed. You're not just smart, Maya observed during one of their conversations. You're educated. What did you do before all this? Study rocks, Krex said in carefully pronounced standard galactic. Mine minerals. Help people. A geologist, Maya nodded. That makes sense. And let me guess, someone destroyed your food sources and you went looking for alternatives. Yes. Ask for help. No one listen. Get hungry. Look myself. And everyone assumed you were attacking instead of asking. Maya shook her head in disgust. Did anyone even try to talk to you? No, only shoot. Only run. Maya's anger at the situation grew daily. Here was an intelligent being who'd been systematically ignored, misunderstood, and finally exiled to die, all because nobody bothered to ask simple questions. Well, she said, handing Krex another batch of synthetic crystals, someone's listening now. As Krex grew stronger, he began helping with the repairs to Maya's ship. His knowledge of mineral composition and crystalline structures proved invaluable for fixing the damaged navigation systems. His massive strength didn't hurt either. You know, Maya said, watching Krex carefully calibrate a sensor array, when we get off this rock, we're going to have some very pointed conversations with the Galactic Council. We? Krex asked. Oh yes, we. You don't think I'm letting them get away with this stupidity, do you? Krex's expression, as much as Maya could read alien facial features, looked hopeful. Besides, Maya added with a grin, someone needs to explain to them the difference between an attack and a cry for help. 3 weeks after exiling Krex to Keth 7, the Galactic Council received an unexpected visitor. Ambassador Thisera of the Vorthak Collective had requested an emergency session, and the Vorthak didn't request anything lightly. Thisera was everything the Council feared in a Vorthak diplomat, intelligent, well-prepared, and absolutely furious. Honorable counselors, she began, her voice carrying the kind of cold politeness that preceded interstellar incidents, that I'm here to inquire about the whereabouts of Krex Andor Thems Vek. Vexthara's tentacles twitched nervously. I'm not familiar with that individual. Perhaps you know him by his common name, Krex. The silence in the council chamber was deafening. The individual you exiled to Keth 7 without trial, investigation, or even basic communication, this era continued. The individual whose disappearance has caused considerable concern among my people. The creature was dangerous, Brack Thorn rumbled. It attacked multiple installations. Krex Andor Thems Vek, this era said, her pronunciation making the name sound like music, is a respected xenogeologist and the third son of the Thems Vek family. He holds advanced degrees in crystalline analysis and mineral synthesis. He is also counselor's royalty. You could have heard a pin drop in vacuum. Royalty? Vexthara squeaked. His family line has produced 12 of our most prominent scientists and 5 members of our ruling council. When he disappeared, we assumed he'd been killed. Imagine our surprise when we discovered he'd been exiled by this body for the crime of looking for food. Ambassador Quilon's optical sensors focused on the Vorthak diplomat. Looking for food. The mining interests that stripped his homeworld also destroyed the natural crystal formations his body requires for survival. He filed proper requests for assistance, all of which were ignored or denied. In desperation, he searched for alternative food sources. But the attacks, Brack Thorn protested. What attacks? This SR's voice could have cut steel. He caused property damage while searching for food. He never harmed a single individual. He even helped repair systems he accidentally damaged. This is documented in your own security reports, if any of you had bothered to read them. The council members exchanged nervous glances. Reading reports was apparently optional in galactic governance. We demand his immediate return, this era continued, along with a formal apology and reparations for this inexcusable treatment of a Vorthak citizen. Of course, Vexthara said quickly, we'll dispatch a retrieval mission immediately. See that you do. The Vorthak Collective is prepared to escalate this matter through appropriate diplomatic channels if necessary. The threat was clear. The Vorthak Collective was one of the most powerful factions in the galaxy. A diplomatic incident with them could destabilize the entire region. After this era left, the Council erupted into panic. How were we supposed to know he was royalty? Vex Thera demanded. Perhaps by conducting a basic investigation before exiling someone to die? Quylon suggested with mechanical sarcasm. The rescue mission was assembled with unseemly haste. 3 ships, full diplomatic honors, and enough medical supplies to treat a small army. They even brought a xenogeologist who specialized in Vorthak physiology, because apparently it had occurred to someone that maybe they should figure out what Krex actually needed. Captain Rex Tar of the rescue fleet reviewed his orders with growing confusion. Retrieve the exile, provide medical assistance, and prepare for potential diplomatic complications. What he found on Keth 7 was not what anyone expected. The distress beacon led them to a crashed medical transport and what appeared to be a small but thriving research station. Sensor readings showed 2 life forms, 1 Vorthak, 1 human. Both healthy, both active, and both apparently working together on some kind of engineering project. "This is Captain Rex Tar of the Galactic Council Rescue Fleet," he broadcast. "Please respond." The reply came from a distinctly human voice with a slight accent and a tone that suggested its owner was not particularly impressed. "This is Nurse Maya Rodriguez. Unless you're here to deliver an apology and a really good explanation, you can turn around and go home." Maya stood beside Krex as the Council ship settled onto Keth 7's surface. Over the past 3 weeks, they'd transformed the crash site into something resembling a proper research station. The Nightingale was fully repaired, Krex was healthier than he'd been in months, and Maya had compiled a comprehensive report on the Council's spectacular failure of basic competence. "Remember," she told Krex, "let me do the talking initially. Humans have a reputation for being difficult, and I intend to live up to it." Captain Rex Tar emerged from the lead ship with a full diplomatic escort. He was a Xelanti-like Counselor Vex Thara, which meant Maya was looking at another bureaucrat with too many tentacles and too few brain cells. Honored Krex Andor, Rex Tar began formally. "The Galactic Council extends its deepest apologies for this unfortunate misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" Maya stepped forward, her voice carrying the kind of professional calm that made experienced doctors nervous. "Is that what we're calling attempted murder through negligence now? I'm Captain Rex Tar. You must be the human who assisted in this situation. I'm Nurse Maya Rodriguez, and I didn't assist in this situation. I fixed this situation. There's a difference." Rex Tar's tentacles writhed uncomfortably. "The Council is prepared to offer full medical support and immediate transport back to civilized space." "How generous," Maya said dryly, "after you dumped him here to die." "There were procedural errors." "Procedural errors." Maya pulled out her tablet and began reading. "Let's review these procedural errors, shall we? Failure to conduct basic investigation. Failure to attempt communication. Failure to consult xenobiological databases. Failure to consider alternative explanations for observed behavior. Failure to provide adequate legal representation. Should I continue? The Council acknowledges that mistakes were made." Mistakes. Maya's voice could have frozen helium. Krex is a scientist and a member of Vorthak royalty. He was starving because his food sources were destroyed by unregulated mining. He filed proper requests for help that were ignored. When he tried to find food himself, you labeled him a monster and exiled him to die. She stepped closer to Captain Rex Tar, who suddenly seemed much smaller despite his diplomatic rank. "Do you know what I found when I got here? A dying person who'd been abandoned by every system that was supposed to protect him. A brilliant individual who'd been judged by his appearance instead of his actions. Someone who needed help and got punishment instead." "The situation has been rectified," Rex Tar said weakly. "Has it?" Maya gestured to Krex. "Tell him, Captain." Tell him how you've rectified the situation. Explain how you're going to prevent this from happening again. Describe the changes you've made to ensure that other people don't get exiled for the crime of looking for food. Rextar's silence was answer enough. Maya turned to address the entire diplomatic party. Here's what's going to happen. Krex is going home with proper transportation and a full honor guard. Because apparently that's what it takes to get basic respect around here. The Galactic Council is going to issue a public apology acknowledging their failures in this case. And they're going to establish proper procedures for investigating situations before jumping to conclusions. The Council doesn't typically accept demands from civilians, one of the other diplomats ventured. Maya smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. Then let me introduce myself properly. I'm Maya Rodriguez, registered nurse, certified in xenobiology and interspecies medicine, as of today. I'm also Krex's appointed advocate and cultural liaison. The Vorthak Collective has requested that I serve in an official capacity to ensure this doesn't happen again. She'd received the appointment that morning, transmitted directly from this era. The Vorthak had been impressed by Maya's care for Krex and wanted her involved in future diplomatic relations. Furthermore, Maya continued, I'll be submitting a full report to the Medical Corps, the Diplomatic Service, and the Galactic Ethics Committee detailing the Council's handling of this situation. I'm particularly looking forward to the section on how a single human nurse accomplished more in 3 weeks than your entire bureaucracy managed in months. Captain Rextar looked like he wanted to argue, but Krex chose that moment to step forward. Fully recovered and standing at his impressive full height, he was no longer the dying exile they'd abandoned. He was every inch the Vorthak royal his lineage suggested. The human speaks truth, Krex said in perfect standard Galactic. His weeks with Maya had improved his language skills considerably. Maya Rodriguez showed kindness when Council showed cruelty. Showed wisdom when Council showed ignorance. The Vorthak remember this. The implied threat was clear. The Vorthak Collective had long memories and longer reach. Of course, Rextar said quickly. The Council values interspecies cooperation and looks forward to working with Nurse Rodriguez in her new capacity. Wonderful, Maya said with false cheer. Our first order of business will be reviewing current cases to identify other situations where basic communication might prevent diplomatic incidents. As the diplomatic party prepared for departure, Maya stood with Krex watching the preparations. You know, she said, when I took this job, I thought I'd be doing basic medical transport runs. Somehow I've ended up as an interspecies cultural consultant. It's a good job for you, Krex replied. Humans good at fixing problems others make. Yeah, we seem to have a talent for that. Maya looked up at her unlikely friend. Are you going to be okay? Going back to all the politics and formality? We'll be okay. Have good advocate now. Krex's expression managed to convey warmth despite his alien features. Maya Rodriguez make difference. Show Council that assuming is dangerous. That asking questions is better than making judgments. Someone had to, Maya shrugged. Besides, somebody needs to teach these people the difference between a monster and a person having a bad day. As they boarded the transport ships, Maya reflected on the past few weeks. She'd crashed on a barren moon expecting to die of boredom and instead found herself in the middle of a diplomatic crisis. She'd met someone labeled as a monster and discovered a friend. She'd faced down a galactic bureaucracy and won. Just another day in the life of a human, she supposed. Because somewhere in the galaxy, there was always another problem that needed fixing, another person who needed help, and another group of officials who needed to be reminded that competence was not optional. The Galactic Council had learned an important lesson about humans. They were unreasonably persistent about things like justice, compassion, and basic decency. And once they decided to fix something, they didn't give up until it was properly fixed. Even if it meant adopting a 12-foot-tall alien and taking on an entire interstellar government in the process. Some things Maya thought as the ships lifted off from Keth 7 were just too important to ignore. And if that made humans difficult to deal with, well, the galaxy would just have to adjust. After all, someone had to be the adults in the room.